Okay, so we are in chapter 17, Sefer Shoftim, the judge, and we are in the last two stories of the book that come as one unit, which are, we can say, the negative stories of Sefer Shoftim. All of them are a little bit negative, but these are extremely negative. We are talking about civil war inside Am Israel. In Hebrew, you don't say civil war, you say brothers war, or war between brothers, Milchemet Achim. So we have Milchemet Achim, we have idolatry, we have theft, we have rape, murder, all the bad things that you can imagine are in these two chapters. But at least in the first story, the story of what we call Pesel Micha, the Pesel of Micha, you don't hear any negative tone in the verses. It may sound maybe cynical or like mocking of the people. We will see some of that, but it's like described in an objective way. It's not so negative as it could be. We are reading about a person that stole money from his mother. When he returned the money to his mother, she told him, I will build a pesel with that money for you, and you will manage this pesel. And that's what he did. He had a temple for idolatry. And in this temple, he used the money he stole and returned to his mother to buy a pesel and trafim. It could have been described in a much more negative tone, but it's not. It's just in a very objective tone. And we also notice that the name of God appears here. They are speaking about God all the time, the real God. At least according to one opinion is the Talmud, but each time it's written the word Elohim, it's idolatry, while when it's written the name of Yud K Vav K, it's God, it's the real God. So we will see that the real God and the idolatry are very, very involved here. So we talked about a little bit, I will talk a little bit more, but first I want to to advance a little bit in the story itself. So we read about Micha, he was building a temple, he had a temple. In this temple, he asked one of his sons to be the Kohen, but it was just a solution. It wasn't what he wanted. Let's just read the last verses that we already saw in verse 4. So we are in chapter 17, verse 4. It says, so when he gave the silver back to his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave it to a smith. He made of it a sculptured pesel, sculpture image, and molten image, which were kept in the house of Micha. The house of Micha meaning his temple. Now the man Micha had a house of God. And here the word God is written as Elohim, meaning not a real God, an idolatry house of God. He had made an ephod and oracle idols, and he had indicated one of his sons to be his priest. Now, there is a verse that repeats several times in this story that closes this part of the story. It says, בימים ההם אין מלך בישראל, איש הישר בעיניו יעשה. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did as he pleased. So this is the end of the first story, or the first part of the story, ending with this verse, meaning the possibility to have a temple for idolatry is a result of lack of authority. There's no king, there's no authority, there's no order. Everybody can do whatever he wants, even making a temple for idolatry inside Eretz Israel. Now we continue with the second part of the story about a Na'ar Alevi. Na'ar, how would you translate it as youngster or youth?
Young man.
Young man. Yeah, it's not kid, it's not adult, it's like adolescent. So the adolescent Levi, this is how we call it. He may had, I don't know, 200 years, but it's always called as a Na'ar, is this title. So also the way it's written, it's a little bit strange. It says, there was a young man from Bethlehem of Yehuda, from the clan seat of Yehuda. So you would imagine that if it says twice that he came from Yehuda, it is Yehuda. No, but he said that the Tanakh says he was a Levite from tribe of Levi and had resided there as a sojourner. So as a sojourner, it's not written. It says, Vehu gar sham. He lived there in Bethlehem Yehuda. Who else lived in Bethlehem Yehuda?
In the time of Tanakh?
Yeah, Boaz, and the story of Ruth. So the family of David HaMelech came from Bethlehem Yehuda. We'll see later the next story also, it's related to that, Bethlehem Yehuda. But it says, even though he came from Bethlehem Yehuda, and he is from the family of Yehuda, Mishpachat Yehuda, he is Levi. So maybe that his mother was from Yehuda. The Leviim didn't have a special place in the land of Israel, so they lived among other tribes. So maybe his mother was from Yehuda and his father was Levi. Anyway, he lived there, and then he left the place. We mentioned that according to Chachamim, who is this Ish Levi? Is a grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. The grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. Maybe it's also alluded several times. It says, Vehu Gar Sham. Gar Sham, Gershom, his father. Later we're going to see. Gershom, the son of Moshe. So Gar Sham, Gershom. So this man had left the town of Bethlehem of Yehuda to take up residence wherever he could find a place. What does it mean, wherever he could find a place? When he will have money. We will see that this guy, the money was the first motive of everything he did. And according to Chachamim, even more than that. According to Chachamim, there is, later, in Sefer Devarim Hayamim, there is a verse that speaks about the officers of David HaMelech. And the one who was responsible of the money, his name was Shuvel ben Gershom. Gershom, also this kid is also Jonathan ben Gershom. So who is Shuvel? What is Shuvel? Lashuv b'tshuva, the one who returned to God. So they say that after he was that, he returned to God. He made tshuva. And after that, he returned again to be priest of idolatry. Why? Everything was by money. He became a priest to idolatry because of money. He made tshuva and became the treasurer of David HaMelech because of money. And when he was fired from that, in the days of Shlomo, he returned to idolatry again because there was parnasa. So it was all about parnasa, right? So he left his place in Bethlehem Yehuda and looked for a place to find a place to live. On his way, he came to the house of Micha in the hill country of Ephraim. So it was only in his way. He didn't want to stay there. So why did he stay there? Because that was a place he could, he didn't stay yet. It says he was in his way. So we understand that there was hospitality there. They hosted him. And Chachamim said that was a good thing about Micha. Micha, even though he was into idolatry and stealing money, etc., but he was a very generous person. And he was hosting everybody that would needed help. And this comes in a contrast to the next story about Pilegesh Bagivah. What was the story of Pilegesh Bagivah? That the people of the Givah, of this city, didn't want to accept the person from the same Bethlehem Yehuda that was going to Har Ephraim. They didn't want to give him a place to stay. So they were against hospitality, the same as the people of Sodom that we are going to read in our parasha, right? While Micha was one who was accepting guests, accepting hosts. And this is maybe the tone is not so negative about him. Chachamim ask, how did Micha survive? How could he do that? And they say, because of this hospitality, because he was machnis orchim. So we can see that kindness, chesed can be antidote to idolatry. Meaning, even though you are doing idolatry, if you're doing chesed, Hashem will forgive you to some level. We will see this point more later. We will see that later. Anyway, he was staying in his way in the house of Micha. Where do you come from? Micha asked him. He replied, I am Levite from Bethlehem of Yehuda, and I'm traveling to take up residence wherever I can find a place. Again, where I can find parnasa.
You want to give me, maybe.
No, he did not a hint. He said, I need to find a place to stay. Now, Micha he hired his son, but he wanted someone in a upper level, right? In higher level. So stay with me, Micha said to him, and be a father and a priest to me. And I will pay you 10 shekels of silver a year. Shekel, today it's the currency that we use in Israel, but it comes from the word mishkal, weight. And this is, it was a weight of metal. And this is 10 shekel of silver. Like pound in England It's libra. It was a pound is libra. It's a weight, and that's why it's LB. And peso in Mexico, in other places, it's a weight. Yeah, it's weight. So always the coin is a name of weight measurements. Yeah, so it's you 10 shekel of silver, meaning like 10 kilo of silver. It's a salary. An allowance of clothing and your food. So the Levi went. Vayelech Levi, meaning he went after the advice of Micha, after the offer of Micha. The Levite agreed to stay with the man, and the youth become like one of his own sons. The word here in Hebrew, Vayoel HaLevi, again, it's a hint to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's said about Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayoel Moshe, he agreed to stay with Yitro. So he just used the same word, Vayoel. Again, it's another hint to relationship between this Levi and Moshe Rabbeinu. So Micha inducted the Levi, and the young man became his priest, and reminded in Micha's shrine. Now I know, Micha told himself, that God, and this time the word God is written as Yud K Vav K, meaning as a real God, that God will make me prosper, since the Levi had become my priest. הלוי, היה לי הלוי לכהן. My Levi became a priest, a Kohen. So it's a little bit look like a joke, right? You're taking a Levi, you're saying you are going to be Kohen, and we have this tone of a little bit cynical tone about this decision. We understand that everything is corrupted, money can buy everything, and this also was business for him, for Micha. The house of God was business. People came and paid, and donations and stuff. So you know that many times the house of God can become the house of money. Yeah, of course, synagogue needs money to exist. It's an important thing. If everybody knows that, and when the things are done with the pure intentions, everything is okay. But many times the religion becomes a source of money. You know that the church during the Middle Age was a huge factory of money, of creating cash. And there are places like that in other religions also, right? Not also in Judaism sometimes. So again, it's important. Without money, we cannot exist. But we should also always remember that the money is not the purpose. The money is a means, the tools to be able to create spiritual space. Anyway, for him, for Micha, it was a business. It was a good business. We can see that he could pay a lot to this kid, and that it could be sustained. And that was the reason for the actions of him. He was a thief for the Levi. But again, I return to the question why we don't use so much criticism about that. So as a first step to answer this question, I want to first of all reduce the severity of idolatry that we see here based on Kuzari. Rabbi Yehuda Levi, in the book of Kuzari, he explained, and we said there are connection between Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, as this story. Again, according to Chachamim. Chachamim, it's not written, any of that, it's not written in the verses. But Chachamim said that Micha was there. Micha was in Egypt, Moshe saved his life, he went out with the pesel. The pesel was built already in Egypt. He was brought with Micha during the all 40 years, and he was also in the moment of Chet HaEgel. And Micha also stole the name of God for Moshe Rabbeinu. It was written on a cloth. How do you say cloth? The paper of Sefer Torah. Parchment? Parchment. So it was written on a small parchment, the name of God, the full name of God, the 72 letters. The secret names of God, and Micha put it in the mouth of the golden calf, so he starts speaking. This is a midrash, okay? But what he tried to say, a midrash, it's not necessarily, it's just come to say the idea that the idolatry it's the same idolatry of Micha, it's the idolatry of the golden calf. And the same explanation about the golden calf is said about the explanation of the Pesel Micha. And the big question about the golden calf, how could they believe that the golden calf was the one who took them out of Egypt? 40 days ago, they saw the voice of God from Mount Sinai and the greatness of God in Mount Sinai. And after the 40 days, they're making idolatry. How it's possible? And Rabbi Yehuda Levi explained that they didn't think that the golden calf was really the God, they thought it's as a tool. It's very hard to connect to the abstract God with unseen and untouchable and untangible, and they need something to connect to. So usually we have Aron Kodesh, we have Tfilot, we have things like that, but it's very hard to connect through this. So they make an image of God, meaning this is our God, meaning through that we can connect to the true God. So it's not allowed because the Torah order what are the right means to connect with God, which are not including idolatry, but it's not as believing that there is other God other than the God. It's just trying to connect with him in the wrong way. So it's bad, it's forbidden, but it's not as bad as we could have think.
Rabbi,
So,
I would challenge that because if they were trying to connect with God, they wouldn't have gone wild after they made the golden calf. They would have behaved properly according to what was told at Sinai, but
so
they didn't.
many times when you are breaking the laws, there is an anarchy. So, right, when you're breaking the law, how to connect correctly with God, you may say, also, this also the right way. We can celebrate, we can do things that make us joy, because this is the right way to do that. So many times it was connected. The breaking the laws, you are breaking also the moral standards. When there is anarchy, the anarchy is taking control about anything, not only about the specific laws that you don't like. That's the reason that it's so important to maintain order and laws. So Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says the same about Pesel Micha. He said they believed in God. We see that, like I said before, all the time the name God repeat in these stories. They believe in God. They only say, we will connect God. We have the tabernacle in Shiloh. Okay, this is for them. We need another thing here in wherever we live. We need also altar and some image that we can connect, etc. So they did it as a mean to be connected to God. So sometimes in the way people forgot about the other purpose and they only were concentrated in the Pesel. But more, at least in this case, in Chet HaEgel, in other cases, it's the wrong way, not the wrong purpose. Right? So this is only, first of all, to reduce the level of severity. It's still not good enough to explain. And then come what we said before about Achnasat Orchim, hospitality. And this is Meshech Chochmah wrote. We mentioned the explanation of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and now I want to add Meshech Chochmah. Meshech Chochmah said, about that and about very other things like Yitzhak mentioned before, that when we have people that sin against God but behave with each other, there is some kind of balance. It's not the right way to do, but it's in some way it's a tone. Hashem say, okay, don't forget about me. Just be okay with yourself. Just treat each other in the right way. And Chachamim mentioned several places like that. And we mentioned Achav and David HaMelech. So David HaMelech was one of our righteous people in our history. But Chachamim say that still, when he went to war, sometimes he lost soldiers. And people fell in the battle. We saw that in the story of Uriah Hittite, right? The husband of Bathsheba, David sent him. So in this case, it was in purpose, but we understand that sometimes it can happen. People in the time of David, even though he usually won the battles, but he lost people. And Chachamim say that in the case of Achav, who was Achav? Achav was one of the most wicked kings in our history. So if you remember the story of Isabel and Eliyahu Navi was hidden from him, and Ara Carmel, Mount Carmel, he was one of the most wicked kings in our history. Still, Chachamim say that when he went out to wars, he was winning, and he wasn't losing any soldiers. And the Chachamim ask why, and the answer is because in the days of David there were people were speaking against each other, meaning there wasn't love or there wasn't union inside Am Yisrael. It's speaking about Lashon Hara, but also Malshinim. Malshinim is when you tell someone, tell on someone, right? So people weren't loyal to each other. There was conflicts and manipulations and stuff like that. How do you say intrigot? Intrigot in Hebrew, you say.
Intrigue.
intrigues, right? When you're trying
They're trying
to
to-
conspirate against other people, etc. Intrigues. So a lot of intrigues and conflicts and tension between people. And when there is, even though everybody was religious, let's say, everybody learned Torah and kept Shabbat and everything and didn't do idolatry and everything, but because they fought between each other, there were failures. While in the case of Achav, even though they did all the idolatry in the world and were wicked people, etc., in this aspect with the relationship with God, between them they were united. And that's the reason they succeeded in the war. So we can say, and that's what Meshech Chochmah, he gives other examples for that. What? Yeah, okay, yes, and another example that he gave. I think I mentioned it one of the drashot here recently, right? So we compare in Parashat Noach between Dor HaMabul and Dor HaPalaga. Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood, and Dor HaPalaga, the generation of Tower of Babel. So the generation of the Palaga, say Rashi, stole from each other. They say Hamas. Hamas is some kind of Dor HaMabul, the generation of Noach. They were stealing from each other, and the decree was a total destruction of humanity. We are saying it's not was only stealing a little bit; it was always corruption of people against each other. So that was the reason the world was destroyed. While Dor HaPalaga, the Tower of Babel, tried to rebel against God. Right? It was the base of that, again, according to Rashi, because the other explanation is idolatry. And what was the punishment? They were spread all around the world.
But they survived.
But they survived. So what is more severe? That's what you ask. What is more? It's to steal or to make idolatry? So say, Hashem said, to make idolatry is less severe. Don't do that. But it's not as stealing from each other. And that's the reason Dor HaPalaga could survive, while Dor HaMabul was destroyed. So also, we can see about that, Chachamim said, again, I'm reminding you the next story. The next story about Pilegesh Bagiv'ah is about a civil war inside Am Yisrael. So clearly, Shevet Binyamin was the bad guy in the story. They were raping this woman, they killed her, they defend the people that did that. They were the bad guys. The rest of Am Yisrael was the good guys. Even though they were fighting to punish the sinners, those who killed this girl. So the good guys were the rest of the tribes, the bad guys were Shevet Binyamin. Still, Shevet Binyamin won in the first 2 days of the war, while Shevet Am Yisrael lost in these 2 days. After that, they won in the third day, but in the first 2 days, they lost the battle. And the question was why? And the answer that Chachamim says there are different answers. One of them was because they weren't Machnissei Orchim, because they weren't, even though also was the tribe of Levi, but the tribe of Levi was together, was united, while the other tribes weren't. So
You see also, it's Dom and Ninveh. Dom have sin against one each other, so they destroy. And Ninveh, they have sins against Hashem.
they could make tshuva.
They make
So
tshuva, and then Hashem.
this is a second level of explanation. So first we explain, yeah, it was idolatry, but it wasn't against God. It was just the wrong way. Second, we say, even though they were bad in the relationship with God or the way to serve God, between each other, at least Micha was a righteous person, was a person who would take care of other people that were going from place to place without money. He hosted them in his house, in his temple of idolatry, but he hosted them. So for the Achnasat Orchim, hospitality of Micha, he received from God some kind of grace. And the third level, this is Maharal add to that it's not only they are good between each other. When we are good between each other, meaning there is a spark of divinity in you. Why? One of the principles of serving God is we try to copy his actions. Chachamim said, what does it mean? We should lidvok be'Hashem. Lidvok meaning stick with God. How can you stick with God? And it says you should follow his ways. The same as he is merciful, you should be merciful. The same. So we look what God did. He is machnis orchim. Is מבקר את החולים. There are different stories of the Torah when we see that Hashem is visiting the sick. he visited Avraham Avinu in the beginning of our parasha. He is doing chesed, kindness with other people. By doing kindness, we try to be similar to God. We try to copy the ways of God. So it's a little bit complicated. God also punish. We don't have to punish. God also revenge. We don't have to take revenge. So how to emit, you say emit, right? I-M-I-T? E-M-I-T, emit God, being like God.
Emulate.
What?
Emulate.
Emulate. You try to emulate God, but in a certain aspects, not in all the aspects. But doing all these things is trying to be like God. And again, I returned to my drasha 2 weeks ago about the kindness. The idea of creating the world was a result of kindness, right? I need someone to do kindness with, so I must create someone else out of me, out of myself. Derech hatov leitiv, the good wants to make good. In order to make good, you need a receptor, someone that will receive this good. That was the motive of the creation of the world. Now we try to be like God, so we try to emulate that, right? We try to be the same, we try to do kindness. So by keeping the ways of kindness, by keeping the generosity, the giving part, we are still connecting with God, not only with each other. It's not like we have being connected with God, being connected with each other, this is more important. No, by being connected to each other, by being kind and helping each other, we also keep this relationship with God, even though we are mistaken in other aspects of this relationship. So this is why all this story, it's negative, but it's not told, it's not written in a negative way. It's like in an objective way. Okay, so this is about that. So just to resume, to sum what we saw until now, so Micha built this temple and the pesel, and then he named one of this boy, this Levite boy, as the Kohen, and everything is working, they making money, everybody is happy. And then in the next chapter, I think maybe we'll stop here. I just read the next verse, first verse of chapter 18. It says, again, in those days there was no king in Israel. And this sentence explains the next part. It says, and in those days, the tribe of Dan was seeking territory in which to settle. For to that day, no territory had fallen to their lot among the tribes of Israel. What does it mean? He didn't have a place to stay, a territory. We read in the beginning of the book that they received a territory near Tel Aviv today. We call Tel Aviv Gush Dan because it's a tribe of Dan. And we read about Shimshon that was living Ben Tzorah uven Eshtaol, which is a place of Shevet Adeni. What does it mean that it doesn't have Nachala territory? First of all, many counting with, I would say, supporting their opinion with this verse, that the story is in the beginning of the book. We said it's not necessarily the chronological order. If we are talking about times when Shevet Dan didn't have Nachala, meaning it's the beginning of the story, before all the other stories that we saw. It may be, but it's also written in the first chapter when it says that each tribe arrived to his part, that many of the tribes couldn't take the part, the territory. They couldn't because they couldn't win the wars against the Canaanim, who had iron cars or chariots. Yeah, so they couldn't. So Shevet Dan is exactly that. He is in the map. We don't have right now the map. Maybe I will show here. If this is a map of Israel, more or less, right? So here we have the mountain. In the mountains, there's no benefit or advantage to the iron cars because you cannot use it. So this was easily conquered by Shevet Yehuda, Ephraim, Menashe. All this part was okay. This part was harder because, and also all the part near the coast was harder because it was plain, and then there is the advantage of the chariot. So it was less successful. Shevet Dan lives here, Tel Aviv. Yeah, Tel Aviv, but going towards the mountains. So they could take this part, which is also belongs to Yehuda. So there were cities that were belong to Dan and Yehuda, but they couldn't take this part. And it wasn't, and if you read the numbers, Shevet Dan is the biggest tribe. Is the biggest tribe of all in numbers. So it wasn't enough place for them. They lived with the Yehuda, with the cities of Yehuda, it wasn't enough place for them. And then they're going to look for a place and they will find another place here, very, very in the far north. You see that today in Israel, we'll speak a little bit about that more next time, but you see in Israel, there is Yarden. The Yarden, what is the Yarden? Is the river, right? It's this river that comes to the Kinneret. And after that, it's between the Kinneret and Yam HaMelech. Today we don't have a river there, but it used to be, all this is the Yarden. Am Israel crossed the Yarden here.
We have not river like something
Yeah,
like
today
that.
we don't have,
Very
we
nice.
don't have because they stop here the water to use it for
That's done.
agriculture.
Yeah.
Anyway, this Yarden has three rivers that in the end they are unite in the Yarden. One of them is the river Dan.
Chatzbani, Banyas,
Chatzbani, Banyas, and Dan. Why Dan? Because the tribe of Dan has this part. And then you have Kibbutz Dan and all many Dan here. And you have Gush Dan here. So because the tribe of Dan was divided between here and here. This is a story that we are going to
We
learn.
have also done cooperative Dan.
Cooperative Dan, yeah, it's a bus in the center. We talked about Eged last time, but yeah. Okay, anyway, Shevet Dan couldn't take his parts, his territory, and is looking for a new territory. Whose fault is it? Of course, Am Israel. Why don't you help each other? Okay, it's hard because of the iron chariots, but if you are united, all Am Israel together, you could have done it. But nobody helps each other. Everybody is for itself. Right? It's the same problems that we always mention during the book. If when each tribe for itself, they won't be able to deal with the other nations that were there. Okay, with that Hashem, we are going to continue next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.